But then the next feather is going to lay right over the top of it, also in an arc shape. So I just continue to build up my feathers in this softer area by doing
Could you
kind of one over
rotate
the
to your left just a little bit? Yeah, okay.
And I am using at this moment the scalpel, however, for doing these feathers, I don't necessarily only use the scalpel. Sometimes I will go in because the top portions may be a little bit firmer or more visible. And this is the Speedball 112. And it will leave a little bit wider line.
So do you follow the photograph, or you just basically do it from the memory, or because you have the knowledge how the feathers should look like when they lay?
It's a combination of both. I mean, I'm certainly using the reference. You can see that I have, feathers in the same position and that kind of thing. When I'm doing my initial drawing, I rely a lot on the photo. When I'm doing my line drawing, however, I don't need to be thinking, well, this feather right here has to be, it's not that exact, I guess, but so it's a combination of both. I pulled out the fiberglass brush, which actually this one is. I softened my fiberglass brush on a piece of regular paper before I put it on my board.
And how do you soften it?
Just
like
by
pressing
kind
on
of
it?
putting pressure on it. That's probably a bit too much, too long. And then on those softer feathers, I don't want as much contrast. I don't want that black ink to really be showing through as visibly. So I'm going to come back and soften up that black area. And I still kind of work in that same kind of following the feather formation that I would with the scalpel. And whether you do the fiberglass before or after probably doesn't really matter. I tend to do it after I scratch because it gives me where I'm going, my map will be. If you're using the fiberglass brush and then going straight to color ink, you do need to be very careful to wipe the board off because the fiberglass brush really brings up that black ink and leaves very small particulates that can mix in with that ink quite a bit. I do tend to try and work to the edge of the board. I do find that there's a little bit of a drop off right when you get right on the edge. It's hard to scratch that edge.
Do you ever turn the board upside down?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I work from a lot of different angles. I do tend to pull my scalpel or X-Acto or whatever my blades are towards me rather than away from me. It's just my comfort level. I know Patrick indicated that he does his away from him. Occasionally I do away from me, but most of the time it's towards me. But yeah, I'll rotate and work all different directions. So that's the general gist of how I do feathers. Unfortunately, I filled in most of the primaries already, but you could see when I was doing the color how I work that area. And it's the same whether you're going to black and white or color in that regard. And my color is, will be re-scratched in color probably in most areas at least 2 times, and some areas probably 3 or 4 times. Somebody else wants to jump in and do a demo, I can do my horsehair later, or I can do horsehair now. It doesn't really matter to me.
Just go ahead.
So do I reintroduce myself?
Keep on rocking.
I feel like catching your breath.
I don't care too much. So onto horsehair. Typically we talk about hair, we talk about it that it will intersect itself and it doesn't always lay exactly straight, whether it's short hair or long hair. Sometimes it'll lay pretty parallel, but typically for more natural looking hair, it will intersect itself to some small degree. You still follow the general flow of the hair, but it's going to cross itself slightly. When you start talking about longer hair, it's typically going to cross itself even more, because the longer the hair, of course, the freer the movement and the more it will intersect itself. And I do most of my hair because, especially like manes and tails on horses, are quite a bit coarser than their body hair or than like a really fine human strand of hair might be. Anybody that's ever felt a horse's mane knows that it's a fairly coarse type of texture. So I don't tend to use the scalpel a tremendous amount for doing manes. I tend to work with my two broader tips a little bit more, which are going to be the two speed ball 112 and 113.
Okay.
And it's really not very scientific, and again, it's like, I know the general gist of where my mane is going to go, but I don't have to be like, well, this strand of hair goes from this spot to that spot. And I work pretty kind of just random. I don't necessarily need to think, well, this has to be one exact long hair. I work in a lot of kind of medium length stripe. You'll see that it's kind of random and not really specifically trying to layer them. Horse manes do kind of lay in clumps. They don't tend to be completely random. They do, as you can see in my reference photo, they do have kind of particular strands that do clump together a little bit, but each strand a lot of times will intersect or cross over another strand. And you can see I'm working with quite a bit heavier hand than I would if I was working on like the body area where it's very smooth. My work, you can see that I'm taking off not only ink but also some clay layer with that. Now the important thing is that if you end up with a random hair that's going like that, you don't leave it disconnected. You need to pay attention that where your lines are ending and starting connect with another line, because otherwise that can look really funny, like, oh, there's a random hair that's not attached to anything. So I would just kind of work that one in. And you can see how I just go over the top of other hairs, and it visibly, to our eye, looks like it's going over the top. Going back to our previous seminar, I use my DNA technique a lot, which is licking my finger and rubbing that ink into the strands or into the stuff that's underneath. So just an example of that. I'll just make this a hair that's underneath the other hair.
How does the ink taste though?
As a matter of fact, I asked Ampersand for some chocolate ink. I said they get right on it.
Were you one of those kids in class that ate the glue?
Still do. What are you talking about? As our eye sees things that are lighter as being closer and things that are darker as being further behind. And you can see in some of these examples where the hair that's underneath was faded out, probably with licking. It might have been water, but most likely with saliva. And the hairs that I have coming over the top visibly to our eye look like they would be in front of it. So it's really not as precise or scientific as a lot of people seem to think that it's very difficult to do, like a horse's mane, but in reality, it's a lot of just kind of random lines that are tied together.
Do I see glue on the horse's face, or is that your DNA technique?
That's just actually some sheen I think you're getting from the fiberglass
It
brush.
does look kind of good.
Yep.
There's a blue. You see it as well.
Do you see that too?
Yeah.
Might be a reflection of Steph's.
I think, I don't know. I see her talking about it.
over there.
I think she's holding out on us.
A
little Smurf DNA in it.
The light as well. Like the green behind us. We'll have a blue coming through the door. We'll blue trap.
So tails and manes, I work pretty much the same. And some of my lines that are coming over the top, I may come in with the even heavier lines. And I kind of need to replace this tip. It's not very sharp right now, so I don't want to put it too much. And then, but I do still use my scalpel in some areas. For example, where I was coming into the shadow areas, I still want there to be the illusion of some hair in there, but I want it to still have a lighter value to it than or a darker value, I should say, to it. Then I will come back in with a scalpel and add in some finer lines that are going to still be more black showing to create the illusion of that shadow. And these finer hairs are just rather random. Again, just kind of following the direction of the horse's mane. Tends to be frizzy up on the top of their necks.
The short hair on the skin, underneath the longer hair, with the short hair put in, then the longer hair.
Yep, I work in the areas that are short. Primarily before, however, sometimes there's going to be areas where I don't know exactly where my mane is going to lay. For example, in these areas where I will lay in my mane first.